the group joining. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. If you're just hopping on, feel free to use that chat feature and just say hi and tell us where you're joining from. It's always fun for us to see how far our reach is across the state. Um, I'm Candace Shibley. I'm with the Utah Division of Water Resources. I'm really happy to be a part of the team that brings these events to you all each month. As we get started, again, please feel free to use that chat feature, say hi. If this is your first time joining us, we started these a little over a year ago with the goal of supporting folks that are planning and establishing and maintaining water-wise or water-efficient landscapes. Here in Utah, we do have a landscape incentive program, which offers up to $3 per square foot for a lawn that's replaced with water-efficient landscaping. That price point does change just based on location. Also, eligibility changes based on location. So, if you're planning to participate in that program, please do not kill your lawn before your project has been approved. We do need to verify that there's lawn in the space before you get started. And check out slowtheflow.org for eligibility, program requirements, and incentive amounts. And as always, I'll send out a follow-up email after this event with a link to that, some other rebate info, and then any resources that are mentioned throughout the presentation. I'll throw those in there as well. So this month we have Brad with Orbit and Chris with Rainbird joining us. We have two competing companies that are going to battle it out. Just kidding. This is going to be really fun. We're going to talk about smart controllers, smart irrigation controllers, which can be a really amazing tool to help folks save water in the landscape if they're programmed correctly. So we'll leave you with some tips and tricks. But before we get started, we have our landscape experts joining us. We have Ben today joining from Washington County. He's a landscape pro with USU Extension. And he's going to talk about just some things that are happening, specifically Washington County, warmer parts of the state, but they might also be applicable to other areas as well. So, Ben, I'll turn the time over to you.
Okay. Let's see if I can get into presenter mode. Okay, can you guys see that okay?
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Okay, so I noticed most of you guys are going to be Northern Utah. There's the one from Blanding. You're going to be a little bit similar to me, but this question I think applies to everyone. And it's a question that we've been getting a lot more the last couple of years. I'm not sure why, but a lot of people want to prune a lot of their landscape plants in the fall. A lot of landscape companies have moved to that. I'm not entirely sure why we're doing that instead of spring, or early spring, late winter, which is still the best time to prune. So that's why I wanted to mention that today. People are getting kind of antsy to start pruning and shaping their shrubs. I wanted to point out that you can do some light pruning in the summer if needed, and some in the fall. But primarily, most of our pruning is going to be in late winter, early spring. And some of that depends on the shrub that you have and when they bloom, and what type of wood they bloom on. So if they're blooming on last year's growth and you prune it all off in the fall, you don't get any blooms. In the spring when it's supposed to. So oftentimes we'll wait until after they've bloomed to do some of that pruning on certain shrubs. Um, but some of the things to keep in mind for pruning, we call these the 3Ds to try and help people remember them. Anything that's dead when you're pruning needs to come out. And you can prune out dead stuff any time of year. If it's died, go ahead and prune it out in the middle of the summer. It's not going to affect the shrub or the tree. If it's diseased, or deformed. I have a coworker, he'd say instead of deformed, he'd call them dumb. If they're just being dumb, if they're growing in a weird place, if you're tripping over it, if it's hitting you when you're mowing the lawn, or if you're walking by it and it's just in the way, you can do some light pruning and get rid of those any time of year. We don't want to do a heavy pruning in the summer for sure, and typically not in the fall. Um, so timing we've gone over, late winter, early spring is the best time to do our heavier pruning. And when we're talking about heavy pruning, we're looking at 25% of the growth of the plant or less. We usually don't want to go over 25%. Um, and the trees and the shrubs are going to respond much better to that. We see a lot, especially in Washington County where we're really hot. We have a lot of landscape companies that they'll just break out the hedger and they'll go to town, and they'll take off half of the shrub to try and get it down to a smaller, more compact bush. But what we find, a lot of those are going to sunburn. The foliage is gone. And some of those will eventually die because they're not as vigorous because we've taken away their photosynthesis abilities by getting rid of the leaves. So 25% is kind of the rule that we stick with as homeowners. Just some tips, I guess, on pruning as you guys are getting ready for it. And if you want to do a little bit in the fall, that's fine, but try and hold off and do most of it towards the end of the winter time. And that's my tip for this month or quarter.
Awesome, Ben. Thank you so much. That was great. Um, let's see. Helen, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I see you just hopped on. What are you guys working on at the garden that might be applicable um, to folks that are on the call?
Yeah. So sorry, we're a bit late. Oh, I gotta unmute. Oh, you can hear me.
No. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we're talking about smart irrigation
No, not
updates.
specifically. I've got a couple presenters doing the smart irrigation. But if you have any, just like a quick, like 1 minute, like landscape tip for the folks on the call, things they might be doing in their landscape this time of year.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been kind of an interesting year with the weather, obviously. So, maintenance wise, a couple of things. One is just, and I don't know what's already been said, but paying attention to efficient irrigation in terms of like if you've got spray heads, having really good coverage, good uniformity, so that we're not applying more water than we need to just to, you know, fix problems like drought in turf grass. So always checking your irrigation and making sure that it's working well and and efficiently. And also if you have drip irrigation, that's often quite easy to fix, but to go through and test those zones as well. Um, And the other thing that we do here at the gardens a lot is a lot of deadheading and cutting back throughout the season to promote new healthy growth, especially where plants have been kind of struggling with the heat a bit this year. It seems to have helped a lot keeping our gardens looking nice and fresh. So those would be my few tips.
Awesome. Those are great tips and a really great segue. And I apologize, I didn't introduce Helen, but she runs the Learning Garden at the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District located in Layton. And she used to be one of the landscape professionals with USU Extension, so she has a lot of knowledge to share. So I'm glad you both could join us. Thank you so much for those tips and tricks. And Brad and Chris, our main event, I'm really glad you guys are able to join as well. Chris, you've worked with Rainbird for over 15 years. You've earned your bachelor's degree in landscape architecture and environmental planning from Utah State University. And you and your wife recently became grandparents, so that's really exciting. Congratulations. And Brad, you are with Rainbird and or I'm sorry, you're not with Rainbird, you're with Orbit, and you've been
As of today,
in,
yes, that's
awesome. You've been in the irrigation industry for over 25 years, which is amazing. And you were heavily involved in launching the Beehive controller in 2016, and you've been running it ever since. So I'm really excited to learn from both of you today. We have a lot of people that apply for our Smart Controller rebate program each year, and so I would imagine that the folks on the call either have a smart controller or are interested in purchasing one. So I think this is going to be a really great topic and a great resource just to have available for folks. And I'm glad both could join us. So with that, Chris, I'll turn the time over to you. And as always, we'll do questions at the end. Please use that Q&A box and we'll get to those shortly.
All right, thank you. So can you see my screen? It's blank, I hope.
Yes, it's
Perfect. Yeah, so appreciate the introduction there. So I think there's a few things that we should just kind of float, right, when it comes to some of this, and this will back up a little bit to what Helen was saying. And I also know that I saw a clip of something that Brad has to show that can explain some of this probably a little bit more in depth. But, there's kind of a couple of things when you really start looking at water conservation. especially when it comes to your landscapes. Um, Obviously, the smart controller is one. That's a big part of it. But there's also a second piece. I like to call it the groundwork or the hydraulics of the system. The things that you're looking at that are in the ground, how it's performing. Helen alluded to the uniformity, the distribution uniformity of how the spray heads are working, how the rotors are working, if the drip and everything is working. And it's, I mean, I think we've all seen different areas and sites where you've gone, even like in the drip locations, and you can see pipe and you can see quarter-inch tube ran to a piece of dirt, right? It's not really landscape or watering anything per se. It's just kind of there. So I think when we really want to talk about all of this, there's a lot to it outside of just the smart controller. But for today's focus, we wanted to just kind of brief in and just kind of talk about some of these things and give you some general information on all of this stuff. So let's see, can I get this to come in? There we go. So how much water is typically consumed in an irrigation cycle? So when your water turns on at your house and it's running 4 days a week, 3 days a week, or whatever, how much water are we really using? Now, I know some of us have been metered. I know I see a few people in the chat that are in the Layton area, and I know most of us have now gotten secondary water meters, so we can track our usage a little bit better. But it's kind of interesting to talk to neighbors and people and not really understanding how much water they're using when they just turn it on and let it go. So, pretty typically, depending on the size of your yard, you can use anywhere from 2,500 to 3,500 gallons. I've seen it go way higher, depending on the size of the yard, that type of thing. So, again, we're using a lot of water, right? And let's say we're doing 4 days a week. So we can do the math over 20 weeks. That's going to come out to 200 to 280,000 gallons, just depending on, kind of where you fall as far as how much water you're actually utilizing on your landscape. And kind of to put that in context, an Olympic sized swimming pool is roughly 660,000 gallons of water. So you're at your house on a typical scenario, you could be using about a third of what it would take to fill an Olympic sized swimming pool. So when you look at that in the grandiose scale, and it's like, oh, okay, that's not horrible, but I take my neighborhood that has 168 homes in it, and you start multiplying that out, and we're talking 17, 18 million gallons of water that are being utilized to just keep our landscapes green, to keep our turf going, and all that kind of stuff. So, where a lot of this starts to come is there's an old catchphrase that we used to use a lot, and we still do, but it was called "set it and forget it." That mentality that we come out in April, and when water was turning on, it was running the same amount of time in April as it was in July. And then again, when we were shutting things off on October, it was still running the same as it was in July. So we're just dumping a ton of water on landscape and areas that are not necessarily needing that kind of water. So what has kind of, I think, and maybe Brad can probably allude to this a little bit more with the beehive. There was a stand that needed to take place, and how do we do better, and how do we keep keep people under, kind of in check? How do we keep water from being wasted in all these different times of the year? Because we do know that in the spring and the fall, those are really our biggest times to save, because when it's hot, let's irrigate. When it's colder and it's wet, let's not. And so kind of the inception of how these smart controllers came to be was, how do we kind of take some of the thinking out of the, normal hands? The set it and forget it attitude had to change. So then we come back to, so like for us, for example, this is some of our controller line on the residential side. Now, I do know we just as you, for a little background, I work on the turf division for Rainbird. We also have a consumer products division. And so a lot of the consumer products division stuff you will see in the Lowe's and the Home Depots and the Ace Hardwares. We deal with more on the turf side, but it's relatively the same. There's a lot of the same, but you might see a few controllers that might look a little different in some of the mega big box stores. But ultimately, you've kind of got your timer, and it's going to be set to where you can set your days of the week, your run times. You can do all that kind of stuff just generally from the timer. So, really, what is a smart controller? Well, it's a device that you can connect your timer to, and it goes on your Wi-Fi network. I know for ours, and I'm pretty sure for most other manufacturers, when you set this all up on the app goes off of a zip code. So when you plug in your zip code, it'll say, okay, well, where's your zip code? Mine's 84040. So when I plug that in, it's going to start pulling weather data from the closest weather station that's going to be within my zip code. Now, fortunately, I'm within probably 2.5 miles of Weber Basin. So I'm probably getting all the data from my controller is being pulled from Weber Basin when they send their signals. And there's a lot of things that go into that as well. So that's where my weather data is coming from. That could help with the algorithms that we'll call it to adjust run times and those types of things based on the weather. So, but in all of that is great, but then you've got to have a software version of this that's actually doing the work in the background. So the controllers are great, they're the horsepower, they're the guy on the wall, but really a lot of what's happening in the background is, handled through the app situation. So we have our Rainbird 2.0 app. This is the one that you would download, and this is the one you would connect to. But really, what this gives us now is the ability to do remote, manual turning on and off of the water. We can come in and we can typically set any kind of a rain delay. So if we see weather coming in, the weather guy's telling us, hey, it's going to rain for the next 2 to 3 days. We could go in and rain delay those controllers all from our smartphone, right? It just gives us more control, gives us more opportunities to save that water. Because if you think about it, if I'm watering 2,500 gallons and I'm able to shut that down for 1 or 2 days a week, I mean, that's a significant amount of water that's saved. And I can do that all by myself just by turning it off or putting a rain delay in there. The other piece that this brings is it brings system notifications. I don't know how many times I've dealt with contractors where they're wondering why there's a dead spot or a couple of areas that just look really really bad, and they find out that they've got a bad solenoid or a broken head that's been watering but it's just flooding down the street type of thing. These controllers are smart with these apps and things to where they can give you a notification if you've got something that it can identify as a problem. It can send you a notification and let you know, hey, you've got a shorted solenoid on one of your valves, so I can go out and I can fix that and get it back up and running. Where traditionally we watched everything die and then we had to try to troubleshoot and figure out why, and it could take days rather than notifying within hours. um, like I said, we pull weather data from a lot of different sources. If you've got a really close weather station, that's awesome. World Weather Online is one that we also pull from when we can. We do have what's called automatic season adjusts, and those are some of the things that you can just turn on right there in that app. And what it will do is it'll take and it'll look at the day's forecast, everything it's done, the amount of rain, wind, temperature, all that kind of stuff. And it can make its own adjustments based on the weather patterns that are going. So when we use the automatic seasonal adjust, that's kind of nice because, you may have a set time of 10 to 15 minutes per zone. But this might decide, hey, I only need to water for 8 minutes. I might need to water for 3, just depending on how the weather is. Or potentially, what was 15 might be 18 when it's been 102 degrees. So it can make those runtime modifications for you. And also with one of the things that ours can do as well, and I'm sure the Beehive and the others can, it's the forecasted rain delay. So what this you can do, you can go in and you can tell the controller, hey, if it's got a certain percent chance of rain, 70, 80, 90% chance of rain, if I flip this forecasted rain delay button, I can tell it to, if it's got an 80% chance of rain and it's going to water for a half an inch or a quarter of an inch or whatever, then I can automatically have that shut down for 2 days and it'll do it for you. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. But taking my, smart controller hat off and just saying logically, that's great. But if my weather data is being pulled from 2 miles away and it gets rain over there and then decides to shut my controller down and I didn't get any rain, now we kind of start running into some of these deficit problems, which, can be a whole nother discussion area. But in that regard, I would say that's when you come in with some of these additional features like an actual rain sensor on site that can monitor and rain right there. But for the most part, you can set these controllers up to have them be pretty smart and just do a lot of different things for you without you really having to manage it. But I will say this, and I think my counterparts will agree. These controllers are only as smart as we tell them to be. When you go in and say, "Hey, I've got sprays, I've got rotors, I've got drip," and you tell the controller, "Hey, you're going to run for 30 minutes on your sprays and you're going to run for 90 minutes on your rotors and all these other things," well, that's what the controller is going to run off of. It can't technically determine your run times. You need to give it some information. So we have to be pretty smart in what we're doing as the human side to say, "Hey, these are all my sprays," going back to Helen's comment on, uniformity. Let's make sure that we've got everything dialed in the ground, because, there's a catchphrase, and hopefully I'll be a millionaire from this, but you can put the smartest timer on the wall, but you can't fix stupid in the ground. And so I think a lot of times we really have to pay attention to what we're doing, because you can put a smart timer on and let it do its thing, and then it looks horrible, and you wonder why, what's going on. But that's again the part where we have to understand. We need to understand our soil types, the type of spray patterns we've got, the type of heads we're using, to really get these things dialed in so that we can be smart and do a lot of water savings. So, um, again, you guys have the chat, so you can ask any kind of these questions and that. But I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brad and let him kind of talk about the beehive.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. I love the data that was shown on how much water savings is possible. When you think about the quantity, it's astonishing. So you could ask yourself, why don't we just rip it all out? Why not just tear everything out? We'd save a lot of water that way, right? There's a lot of benefits to our landscapes, and we won't get into those so much today. We're going to get into smart watering and how that works, but I love where we're going in terms of balancing the right amount of turf with native plants, drought tolerant plants, not putting turf in non-useful areas, and doing the right thing. So we've been with Beehive here at Orbit. We've been working on changing the way the world waters from faucet to farm. In terms of the state of Utah, these are two numbers that I love, and the 25 represents how much water our lawns need in a growing season. So from, as Chris mentioned, April to October, this is our growing period here in Utah. Essentially, they need about 25 inches of water. The number on the right is how much water most people apply. So there's the delta, there's the gap. How do we bridge this gap? And I'll just say that smart controllers are working to bridge that gap actively. But let me just talk about a couple of questions for today's conversation. Do smart controllers save water? I will just say unequivocally yes. As Chris mentioned, and I think this is such a strong point, if you skip one event, two events, four events, spring and fall, you're starting to miss these watering events, and you're using 2,500 plus gallons of water every time you water. It is astronomical, the savings that can be achieved. And then when you get rain delays, even in the summer, we're going to talk about those a little bit too. The water savings is just so huge, and so smart controllers can do all of that. And Chris laid that out in a great way in terms of talking about smart controllers will shut down if water is coming. We look back and see how much water fell, and we adjust accordingly. So that's very cool. How do they save? The weather changes, so should your watering. And I saw a question I want to get to, Helen, later on, but that popped up in the chat. Should everyone have a smart controller? I would say absolutely, unequivocally, yes. And I'll show you the numbers behind that. So this is this is actually a screenshot from my own app. This is August. So when we've asked people, do you put your timer in a manual rain delay if you don't have a smart timer, over 99% say no, I don't touch it. That's a problem, again, because when it's raining, as it's been, and controllers are watering, this is certainly a big problem where we waste the most amount of water, honestly. But this is great. This is August in Utah. 2 years ago, I went into a rain delay. We had so much rain falling, and I actually delayed for 13 days plus a day on the front or back end. I didn't water. It was 14 total days. If we just said that I was an every other day waterer, which most people are around this time of year, that's 21,000 gallons at 3,000 gallons per pop. If I was an everyday water, a lot of people do that too. I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone on this call, but that would be 42,000 gallons saved. So when you're balancing, what should I do in my landscape? Should I tear out my park strip? The estimated savings from the state that I've heard from that, Candace, correct me if I'm wrong, is 7,500 gallons a year is the estimated savings from tearing out your park strip. One watering event, I did 5+ times that. So you have to not just do one thing. Like if I flip my strip and I still have a non-smart controller, or I still water every day and I don't let it adjust based on the season, or it doesn't shut off for rain, you've solved one problem, but you haven't solved the other side of that. So it's really about a multi-pronged approach, attacking things from all sides. Within the state of Utah, we actually monitored this one event. This is really cool. We saved 600 million gallons in that one event across all the beehive controllers in Utah. If everyone had a smart controller, be it Rainbird, Beehive, Rachio, anyone, this is a 2.4+ billion gallon savings opportunity across the state for one rain event 1 year. So when we're looking at $100 rebate, I hope everyone gets, either if you haven't got a smart timer, get a smart timer. And then apply for the rebate. It's $100. It's the cheapest water savings that we're working on as a state. Flipping your strip is very expensive. Getting a smart controller is a one-time payment, $100. The state will refund you $100. It's very, very affordable water savings. So I hope you'll apply for those if you haven't. We saw in that one event that 80% of controllers in the state of Utah, there's over 100,000 controllers, we watched 80% of them went into an automated rain delay. Astronomical. The numbers are huge. It's very cool to see. And this is really, if we don't get anything out of this besides that, I hope you could say, yes, I want to do it for rain delays. We talked about this. Really, I put it on the low end of 2,500. Chris's numbers are spot on. It's 2,500 is kind of the base, and it goes up from there. So that's how much you're saving every time you water. I like to equate it to, I've equated it to reservoirs in the state of Utah. I've equated it to other things. I like to equate it to toilet flushes. If you replace your non-efficient toilets with efficient toilets, it's about a gallon, a little over a gallon per toilet savings that you get every flush. 1 day of watering can save as much as 1 year in a household of flushing your toilet. So just put that all in perspective. If you are just letting it run when it's raining, if you're just letting it run in the spring or the fall when you don't need it, literally you're erasing every bit of water savings you're getting elsewhere. This is why it's so important. This is a poll I did at the Water Smart conference in Las Vegas years ago. I polled everyone. I've saved the results of that. It was really shocking. These were water professionals, and this was the results I got. Do smart controllers save water? And such a small percentage, or such a large percentage, I should say, saying no. And so let's talk through that. How do they save? Chris touched on this a little bit. They seasonally adjust based on the weather. We call it evapotranspiration. As evapotranspiration, which is a combination of different things we're going to go through, but temperature, humidity, heat index, rainfall, all of these different things plug into the ET equation. They should be adjusting all year long based on ET, and they do that. This is what beehive controllers do, other Rainbird controllers do. They adjust for rain, wind, freezing. High wind is one of the biggest water wasters, so we shut off for that as well, which is huge. Freezing isn't as much of as big of a deal here as it is in other places that water more year round. What percentage of smart controllers go into an automated rain delay for a weather event? Again, this was a poll. This isn't the actual, this is a poll. So there's the results. Over 80% of people thought that they would go into an automated rain delay based on a weather event, but you can see that the spread there. This was the real revelatory moment for me, is asking people how many homeowners or contractors put them in a rain delay if they're not a smart controller. And this was a room of, I don't know, 100 people, 150 people. 100% of people said 0 to 20%. When we've dove deeper into this number, it's less than 1%. So big opportunities. So how does it work? This is just a few screenshots. These are real screenshots of an actual controller. This is May 2024. So if you look, and I like these extreme cases. May 2024, you can see on the left screen, we had rain forecast for 2 weeks. Every beehive controller is looking out 15 days ahead, actually, all of the time, perpetually, throughout the whole calendar year. It's looking at those weather events. It's adjusting intraday. It's going to adjust every few hours. Actually, if something changes, it will update and adjust. But it's looking out 2 weeks. You can see freeze delays happening in the spring as well. Look at the temperature there, which I think is really interesting. If you look at May 1, high of 40, low of 30, people are watering on those days. Absolutely no need to water when the low is 30 degrees. No need to water if it's going to be in a freeze delay. And so you can see then that on the right, we won't get into that, but but your moisture is okay because you're getting rain, and we're tracking all of the rainfall you receive as well. So it's the smart controllers are managing this for you. And what Chris said, I think in the beginning is super important. Set it and forget it. We actually set it and forget it used to be a terrible word in the industry. I actually tell people now, set it and forget it. Leave it alone, and Smart will do an amazing job for you and save water. Little quick video here.
Weather is actually the accumulation of thousands of micro-events occurring in the air, on the ground, and in and above our planet's waters. A system monitoring these events must track temperature, wind, humidity, UV, and precipitation variations. Using complex algorithms, Beehive establishes the ideal watering solution for each property it oversees. Beehive takes in additional inputs from the space it's watering, like the amount of sun and shade, the kinds of plants that are growing, and even the angle of slope in the ground. Together, these variables help determine a unique and ideal watering strategy for that day, a strategy that may be completely different 24 hours later, based on the unique characteristics of the property, like structures that prevented the sun from reaching the ground and spaces where the sun shone brightly. More mysteries are solved underground, where Beehive measures the amount of water in the soil. The soil we grow things in is like a sponge. It can only absorb so much water before runoff and water waste occurs. Plants themselves are limited to how much water they can contain and how much water they can access from the soil. Beehive won't water an area that isn't in need of watering, and it will ensure soil and plants that need hydration receive a sufficient amount.
Okay, very good. So how long and how often should you water? This is a question we get all the time. We're going to just touch on this briefly. Luckily, there's an app for that. Again, the smart systems and settings can do that for you. I just have some screens here. I don't want you to get lost in how busy this looks because I'm showing multiple screens at a time here. But on the left, you'll see the settings that you'll adjust: a soil type, a plant type, a sprinkler type, how much sunlight the area receives. Does it receive the rainfall? This is something we added to the Beehive app. A lot of times people have plants that are under a patio or under an eave. Or under, maybe they've got a heavy canopy of trees and you don't get all of that rainfall down to the ground. So you can adjust for that. How much slope do you have? And then we're going to really get into, Chris pointed this out as well, and I think this is super important. The system is only as smart as we make it. Every smart controller has the same deficiency. We estimate the application rate. This is where every smart controller can go off the rails completely. And so I'm gonna touch on this a little bit, but we're gonna get back to that right there. The sprinkler type will determine the application rate or the precipitation rate. You can adjust these on all of our screens. So if you select a spray, you can just hit that advanced, and then there's a slider that says I can take it up or down. You can look at your manufacturer specs. If you've got a Rainbird 1800 series head, or you've got a 100 Pro spray, or you've got an Orbit head, you can look at the specs on those and you can adjust accordingly to what the application rate says. We have really simple ways to adjust it too. Some people don't love getting into smart and then feeling like, okay, it's doing something and I don't like what it's doing, or I don't know what it's doing, or it's running too long, or it's not running long enough. We have simple adjustments over here on the right, these schedule adjustments. We give you an estimated interval between waterings for April, May, June, July, August, September, and we just say don't water. And really, you don't need to water in April anymore. We've not been watering in April for actually a number of years. So, and this is automatically determining this based on ET. So based on the science behind all of this, the evapotranspiration rate is what's dictating when we're saying don't water. So you can go in and adjust the runtime right there, and this will give you an estimated. And then you can adjust that interval between waterings as well. So this is a simple way. If you're like, I like to run for 15 minutes and don't tell me I shouldn't, or whatever it is, you can go in and you can adjust those things up or down and still stay in smart mode and have all the benefits of smart. So let me just say it like this. If you have a check engine light on in your car, most people don't know what that means. You may guess, you may think it's an O2 sensor, you may think it's something else. Most people hook it up to a computer to learn what's wrong. sadly, we're a little bit the same way in irrigation. We're kind of guessing with this number that I mentioned, this application rate. So this is important. Um, as I mentioned, you can slide that slider up or down, or you can do an irrigation audit or a catch cup test. Now, before you think that the word audit to me instills like my heart rate goes up, I get a little nervous. I understand that. But let me just show you, and let me see if I'll be able to show you this, how easy this is to do. Okay, and I put that the catch cup feature is the smartest thing you can do, and it's the only way to know the actual application rate of a zone. A contractor may set it up perfectly, and then over the years, maybe a homeowner changes out a head, a nozzle. They mix different types of heads together. This is a common problem in Utah. This is a hard one to solve, actually. But what you can do is you can set out catch cups. And these are just little plastic cups, and I'll show you some here in just a second. You can run the zone, input the volumes into the app, and it will tell you the actual application rate. It will also tell you the distribution uniformity. And smart controllers can adjust based on the distribution uniformity. So if you have really inefficient systems, you can water longer. I will tell you, if you're curious what happens, if you do a catch cup test and you see a 37% distribution uniformity, which honestly, anything above 60 is really hard to achieve, and most people don't achieve it. But I'll just say, so this happens all the time. We default to 75% and we make you change it, because otherwise you'll start getting to what Chris said of 30-minute runs on sprays, 90-minute runs on rotors, or even longer. So that's really, this is really the only way to know what that check engine light means. It's the only way to know what that actual application rate is. This is built right into the Beehive app. You can test it, and it's easy to save 30, 40, 50% water based on the results of this test. So this is super simple to use. I have a video in here, and I actually I think it's in a separate window. Hang on, let me go out. Let me see if I can pull it up. I don't know if I can. Candace. Is my screen showing anywhere anymore?
I'm seeing your slide layout, the notes.
Okay, let me try one thing here. Let me just share this one. This is really cool to see, and I want you guys to see it. So let me just share this really quick. Share a different window.
Brad, will you send this to me as well? I'd like to include the link in the follow-up email.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Okay, are you seeing a Beehive Save Water with Catch Cup screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, let me just start this. It's a little glitchy here, sorry.
I'm Natalie Eyring. I'm in my yard, and I'm going to show you how you can use Beehive to save water. I arranged the cups about 3 feet away from each head, and then also in between the heads. And now through my Beehive app, I'm going to run a test for each of the zones for about 5 minutes. So now we're going to input how much water is in each one of these cups. So in the Beehive app, you can just put that right in. Okay, I'm now looking at my results from this test, and the application rate was 1.2 inches per hour, which is really high for these kind of rotors. And instead of doing 50 minutes of watering, it will now be cut down to 20 minutes of watering. And it used to be I was using 1,000 gallons of water every time that I watered, but now using Beehive, I will only be using 400 gallons of water. This will cut down on my water bill 60%. Thank you, Beehive.
Okay, so that is that's a real example, by the way. Those are actual numbers, actual results. Chris, those were Rainbird 3500s? Is that the medium area rotor? Yeah,
Yes.
those are 3500s, and you can see that just doing that audit again. If you just plug that in, you've got a number of manufacturers that would have put that precip rate at 0.75 inches per hour. One that puts it up at 1, no one that went as high as it went. So just doing that audit was super helpful for getting the actual results, and those water savings are real. That's one zone. Every time it waters 600 gallons. So that's just huge, absolutely huge. Sorry, I'm trying to get back into full screen mode here. So just a great example. Another feature that's, so everything that Chris talked about within a smart controller is there, you know, from the forecast rain delay, it goes into automated rain delay for you, notifications, all of those things. We added this during the last big drought. believe that was in 2021, where you can actually go into, and you can do this by zone. So if you have a drip zone that maybe you're using a high, super efficient system anyway, and you don't need to put it into a drought setting, that's okay. We do it by zone. So you can go in and down in those smart watering details, you can see there's a drought setting down at the bottom. And if you click on that, you'll see the drought, the US drought monitor, and it will show based on your state you're in, it will show you what it looks like. This is what it looked like back then. And then you can see the corresponding D0, D1, 2, 3, 4, and you can put that zone in that setting. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is what happens when we get into drought is we got to save 20%. I don't, 99.9% of people that I talk to don't have a clue what saving 20% looks like. And nor do we understand what it means to shift to even a Tuesday, Friday, or whatever day of the week watering is, and people start watering more on those days. A lot of places that go to day of week watering, and there's been surveys all across the United States, they actually start using more water by doing that. So this was a way that we allowed people to stay in smart watering and keep it in a smart mode. Go set the drought setting for that zone and for the controller, and then you can see that drought factor of 75%. That is a multiplier off of ET. So it's essentially saying, because it's a counterintuitive thing that happens when it gets hotter. Smart controllers want to water more. ET is higher. A smart controller says, I want to water more. That's counterintuitive to saving water when it gets hotter. And so this drought monitor, and using the drought monitor to apply this, you can go put it in the drought setting for your area, and it will say that'll save 25% or use 25% less ET for that zone. So this has been super helpful. I've run this now for every year since we did this, and I've seen the commensurate or corresponding savings each time I run it. Last year I had it in a moderate drought, and 10% was my savings across the board from the prior year. So anyway, this is a cool feature that's super helpful. Allows you to stay in smart mode, keep going that way. This was some feedback we got. Lawn appearance improved. This is ironic because I think people do start doing a lot of interesting things when it gets super hot. And let the controller work on its own, and usage report, you can save less or use less water, excuse me. So very, very, very cool there. This is really the crux of it. So this is where everything just kind of overlaps. And these are real numbers. If you look at the graph on the left, the 2 is saying an every other day water from April to October. They're going to water 90 watering days essentially. A smart controller that is using ET and adjusting based on the season can water about 48 days per zone. Sometimes less. I've seen less than that. And it follows that nice bell curve right there. And that's where the savings occur. If you just say 2,500 gallons per event, and again, that's low for most homes in Utah, but if you just say that, you can see there's 105,000 gallons of savings. This is real. This isn't like we cook this up on a spreadsheet and it doesn't work in the real world. I've tested this, I've used this, and this really can happen every single year, especially in those tails, like was mentioned with the fall and the spring. You can just save so much water in there. And again, if we get a great rain event in August and you're going to rain delay for multiple days, even better. So this is absolutely achievable. So in terms of the products, I'm going to just breeze through this. You guys have probably seen a lot of these, and we've got we do center pivot controllers for farms. We do landscape irrigation controllers, and we do faucet controllers. We have controllers that are 1, 2, 4 port on the faucet, single port, and I'll just kind of breeze through these. You may have seen these. This has a built-in flow meter, so if you aren't flowing water and you should be, you get a notification. If you have water flowing and you shouldn't be, you also get a notification. So it's its own leak detection or leak monitor within this device itself. Again, if you want to display, there's 1, 2, and 4 ports. So anyone that's like putting in a raised garden and you've only got a pipe and you're not going to plumb another irrigation valve or whatever, you can just easily put on a faucet timer and make something like this smart as well. This works in the Beehive ecosystem. These are all EPA WaterSense certified. Everything I've shown you, as is, buying nothing additional, is EPA WaterSense certified. So you can get rebates on all of these controllers. If you want, here's an in-ground controller, 8 and 16 zone. It has dual band Wi-Fi, and so if this is it can go indoor, outdoor as well. This is the one. This is our best-selling sprinkler controller. It's indoor outdoor as well. Launched in 2016. This is our original we launched with. And if you want a more affordable model, here you go. This one's down under $100 every day of the week, so you can. And this has all the same smarts. Nothing is sacrificed here. It is not outdoor installable unless you had a separate enclosure. So I really say set it and forget it is a good thing now. And with a smart timer, you can sit back, relax, and let it do the water worrying for you. So let me pause there. Sorry. I was just going to skip that last video for the sake of time, and just turn it over to you, Candace, for any discussion.
Awesome. Great presentations from both of you. I really appreciate it. Matt has a great question. I think this would be really useful to a lot of people. He bought his controller in 2020 and just hasn't had it on smart mode, just been using manual. And we've had conversations about how sometimes the nice feature is just being able to use it from your phone, but
Yeah.
we're trying to get people to that next step. Do you guys have resources that I could share with the group that will just help people program, like start to
Yeah.
finish?
Yeah, great question. There are videos out there on our website and on YouTube for programming our smart controllers and setting those up. But yeah, I'm just looking back to the questions. Let me see. Where is that question?
It's in the Q&A. It's the very first one in there from Mark. Or I'm not Mark, Matt. My apologies.
Okay.
I'm just thinking ahead with the smart controller rebate
Yeah.
program. It might be really nice to have like a follow-up email that goes to folks when they purchase their device that just links out to
Yeah.
all the different suppliers with resources for them to
Yeah.
program things correctly.
It's a great idea. Yeah, there are those videos, but yeah, linking them is a great idea.
Okay. Yeah, if you guys have things that come to mind that you'd like to include in that follow-up email and then email to applicants, let me know and I'll start working on that. Okay, Chris, this is a question for you. Wendy she has an ESP TM2 controller. It doesn't have a rain sensor. She's wondering if it's compatible, if she'd be able to add one.
Absolutely. Pretty much any of our controllers are compatible with white or excuse me, rain sensors. But yeah, you can add it at any time, and they've all got the wiring diagrams and everything in there too, so it shows you how to wire it up and add a preset everything as well.
Cool. We've got a quiet group today. If you guys have
Yeah,
questions,
and
use that Q&A box. Q&A. Oh, I can't talk today. Q&A.
yeah, I was just going to throw out that yeah, I think most smart controllers can take a rain sensor as well. I get asked a question that was brought up a little bit earlier, touched on my settings that I have found I'm in Kaysville. Settings I've found that work perfectly for me are setting it to the lowest rain amount and a 40% chance of rain, and I'm batting nearly 1,000 for the last 9 years with those two settings and not getting false positives, not having it shut off for rain and then no rain falls. But as was mentioned, with those, you do have to kind of adjust it for your area. You can connect to those local weather stations, official weather stations, things like that. We do always look back to see how much fell and adjust going forward. So if it's, it forecasts this much, we shut off and it only rained this much, we do adjust for that. But yeah, that's where I found the sweet spot for mine. Some people have told me 50%. Some people depend, like Florida, you've got to set it at 90%, but because it rains all the time. Anyway.
One more question, and there are no dumb questions. But Wendy just wants to clarify. She only needs one sensor, right? Like rain sensor.
One per controller, yeah.
Okay. All right, cool.
And also I would say with those rain sensors, and just like anything, it's the same scenario. I was on a job site just the other day, and the guy was saying, "Well, my rain sensor's not working," and the reality was that he had it installed on a rain gutter underneath a pine tree. So, when we're putting these things on, we just have to be very mindful of where we're putting them in the right locations, just like everything. It's kind of interesting to see some of these things that go in and how they go, and it's like, just thinking through a little bit about where those need to be located, and and your setup and everything else is critical, like we've already talked about. So
Helen had a question in the chat. I don't know if that just goes to the hosts and the panelists,
Oh,
but
thank you.
what are the opinions, ideas on changing runtimes for a seasonal adjust versus changing the frequency? I think that one's worth addressing. I wanted to get to that. Helen, great question. The way we adjust is we we look at your soil reservoir as the same. So if you had a kid swimming pool on your back patio, your kid swimming pool doesn't get deeper or more shallow based on the time of year. The thing that changes is how fast it evaporates out of that pool. It's the same with your reservoir in your plants. So we fill the reservoir, it'll adjust a little bit, but we roughly say that we're filling the same amount every time. What we adjust on Beehive is we adjust the frequency. And so that frequency goes out because we don't want to shallow water and frequent shallow water and develop roots that start climbing up. We do deep and frequent typically, and we adjust the frequency.
Cool. That's great. Great question, Helen. Um, this is a great question. So how do these controllers get the weather data into the controller? How is it accessing the data?
Yeah, Chris, do you want to go or?
yeah, well, you probably know a heck of a lot more than I do on that. So what I have been told is that based on, again, your zip code, there's an algorithm built into these apps that will say at a certain time, at least on ours, it'll go out and, like I said, if it's 84040, it's going to pull the weather data from a certain source, and it's going to compile that information through the day so that when it's time to water, it takes that algorithm into effect and says, hey, we've lost zero point 0.2 inches of water today because it's been pretty warm. It makes its adjustments based on that. But it's all done through the waves, the internet. It's all pulled from data that's being pulsed out from, like I said, Weather Underground. I think NOAA comes into play. There's a lot of different sources. But yeah, that's how it all pulls it in the background. So it's all kind of being pulsed out and dealt with, behind the scenes just to make it easy for the normal everyday guy that just wants to have it set up and not have to worry too much about how to plug different factors in and do algorithms. But maybe Brad can explain it a little bit better on his end.
No, great explanation. What we do with Beehive, we use satellite weather for forecast weather. We cover the entire globe with the satellite weather. If you put in your address, we geolocate exactly where you are, so that we're finding exactly where, if a storm's coming, we're actually pinpointing. We're not looking at where you're living. Don't worry about that. But the system can look and say, okay, here's the closest weather grid within satellite weather. We true up with actual weather station data, and so that process of sort of having two systems constantly working, Chris alluded to this, has actually been very effective, and it keeps us. It allows us to not have one thing go sideways on us and ruin the whole thing. So there's constantly a check and balance there in terms of what's happening. So, yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think you answered it quite well. And then maybe just to clarify, like when people are setting these up, it does ask for their address, like they're inputting their home as
Yep.
as
Yeah,
a
it does. It does. It asks for that, and you'll get the best data if you don't just use your zip code. If you use an address in Beehive at least. And again, we're not looking at those. We don't look at those. So we don't share that out anywhere. Nothing happens with that data. That's just to pinpoint your location for weather.
Cool. That makes sense. Another rain sensor question. Where would be the best place to locate a rain sensor if you had one or were considering?
Well, so for mine, where I've got it located, I've actually, because it's wireless, I've got it located out on a fence pole that's kind of out in the
Mm.
side yard that's not being impeded by trees or hot little areas on the side of your house that's south facing, or I mean, just little areas like that. I would find the most open area you can, but make it a little bit inconspicuous too, because I have kids that would throw stuff at those just because that's how kids are. And also note too with those, I like to say too, locate them somewhere that's relatively simple to get to, because these do have a battery to them. They do have a battery life. And if you do need to maintain or change, get it so that you can get back up into it. And especially too for winterization, that's part of it too, is we typically tell a lot of our clients to just take them down in the winter so that they don't end up under the snow and get broken and break the brackets. And then you got to get a setup come springtime. So just make it easy, accessible, but definitely out in the open enough to where you're going to get good weather data with when it comes to rain.
Cool. Great points. All
So I
right.
did have one closing thought for you on
Please.
this. We've talked a lot about, you know, these are all great controllers. They're all smart. They do their jobs. They do a lot of good things for us. But I still like to kind of go back. I think most of us, a lot of us probably grew up in the day where you were pulling a hose with one of those oscillating sprinkler heads, that went back and forth like this. And, the thing that was unique about that is that you kept an eye on it all the time. You knew when it was watering and you'd shut it on, turn it off. I would definitely tell this group, make sure you're always checking your system. Make sure you're walking your property at least weekly, maybe more, but just make sure you don't have broken heads. You don't have a nozzle that's gotten spun 180 degrees and now it's spraying out in the road instead of on the grass. Just be mindful of this too, because that's also a big piece of this. Because these smart controllers, they can do an awful lot, like Brad has said. I mean, you're pulling a ton of this data and algorithm into this unit, and it's great. But at the end of the day, it can't tell you whether or not that head's been broken unless you've got a flow sensor, or the heads are all spinning out in the street because the kid that mowed the lawn did some weird stuff, right? So always check that stuff, because that can be a big saver right there. Is just, I don't know how many times you see sprinklers that are just spraying out in the yard or the road, and they do it for days, if not weeks. And it's like, why is nobody checking that? Why is nobody going and looking at that? Be mindful of what's on your property and where things are, because the smart controllers coupled with you just keeping an eye on it's going to be huge too.
Yeah, great points. Brad, do you have any closing thoughts?
Great points, ditto. Totally agree. And I would challenge everyone to try a smart controller. And I will say this: let it do its thing for 2 weeks. If you notice something crazy, absolutely address it, but let it do its thing for 2 weeks. I don't have to touch my watering device at all anymore, and I save unbelievable amounts of water. So, I would say always look for the equipment issues for sure. Spot watering, if there is an issue, fixing the issue, or spot watering, not watering the whole thing. I know a lot of people just turn the whole thing on if they got one dead spot. And again, once people can see that and they know, if I'm using 3,000 gallons, I had my child one time, he was young at the time, stand next to a 2,000-gallon water tank. It's a ridiculous amount of water. If you know you're using that much, just be a little bit more vigilant, paying attention to this. If you can get from that 50 that we're using down to the 25, we're not going to be having the conversations we're having of no more watering, or no more building, or tearing out all of your turf, or all of those things. So I'm a big believer in using what we have responsibly so that we can keep using it.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. I know I love my smart controller. I think one of my favorite features is the forecasting, and like getting the alert sometimes at night, like, hey, it's gonna be kind of windy, so we're gonna hold off and we'll make up for it tomorrow. I think that's just
Awesome.
such a great feature.
Yeah.
Um, really appreciate both you guys joining us. As always, these are recorded. We'll get them posted to YouTube. I'm going to send out a follow-up email with all the resources for everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Take care.
You too.